What's going on, y'all? So, of course, I had to come back and do a follow-up video on this R. Kelly imposter and the possibility that the content that he used in this fraud could possibly actually get R. Kelly off. Now, this whole thing is crazy. I'm telling you off the bat, this entire thing just simply crazy. So I was reading some of the comments on my page, and I think one person, critical thinker, is saying that this act was fraud, and because it's fraud, we can't really pay attention to anything that the actual letter actually says. And I partially agree with that, right? I partially agree with that. Of course, everything that this imposter did is fraud. There's no doubting that. There's no doubting that, right? But on the other hand, to me, it seems like the information he provided almost demands that R. Kelly's lawyers actually follow through. And I'm going to get into why. I'm going to get into why in a second here. But I actually want to cover some comments another person made. And they actually said, well, what crime did the imposter commit? So to me, it just seems like, that person believes that the imposter really didn't do any harm. And I just kind of want to make it clear that the imposter did a lot of harm. And there are several crimes that I found, right? And I'm not even a professional. So if I'm finding statutes and charges under which the imposter could be indicted under, you can only imagine what the prosecutor is going to find, because like I said, I'm not a prosecutor, I'm not a professional in this area, I'm just some guy on the internet. So if I'm finding stuff, just imagine what the prosecutor is going to find. The prosecutor going to be able to pull out probably 20 times as many charges as I found. So let's just go through some of these possible charges that could be laid against the imposter, and then we're going to get into the actual content of the fraudulent letters and the fraudulent motion, and we're going to get into why that information is important, right? So the crimes that the imposter committed, the ones that I could find, is 18 USC 1341, and this is for frauds and swindles, right? And I'm not going to read it because it's going to be a little too wordy. But basically, you're using the mail and you're trying to deceive someone. That's the gist of it, right? And then it just gives you a long list of things that qualifies as mail fraud. So, this person can be hit with mail fraud or frauds and swindles. Then another thing that he can actually be hit with is 18 USC 1342, fictitious names or addresses, because he's trying to put this thing into the mail and then he's trying to pretend as if it's coming from R. Kelly. So already we're at 2 counts that could potentially go into his federal indictment if they catch the guy. And then he could also be hit with 18 USC 1349, attempt and conspiracy, right? Attempt and conspiracy. And basically, this is going to apply if he's worked with anyone to actually accomplish this fraud that he already perpetrated, right? So a conspiracy is just an agreement between two people. So already we're at three possible crimes, or three possible charges in his indictment. And then, as you know, the government likes to give you multiple charges for the same thing, right? So you could potentially, or he could potentially get multiple charges of the same thing, depending on how he actually sent these documents and depending on the people that are involved. There could be multiple charges here. And again, I mean, this whole thing is just crazy. But let's get into another thing that he could actually be hit with. One second here. The imposter could also be hit with just good old fashioned fraud, right? There's no statute for this. There's just elements that one would have to prove. And I'm just going to use Illinois as an example, but fraud is just kind of one of those universally accepted common law crimes that it's probably going to be the same in different jurisdictions. So again, so the letter was actually sent from Severn, Maryland. So even though I'm looking at the Illinois common law claim for fraud, it could be similar to the one in Severn, Maryland. And then, of course, since it happened in Illinois, he could potentially be charged with fraud in Illinois as well. So you could look. You're looking at a situation where the guy could be charged in multiple states as well. So he could be charged in Severn, Maryland. He could be charged in federal court, and then he could be charged for the same exact thing in Illinois, right? So there's multiple charges in multiple jurisdiction, right? So in Souls v. General Motors, fraud, we formulated the elements in a fraudulent misrepresentation as one, a false statement of material fact; two, knowledge or belief of the falsity by making it; three, intention to induce the other party to act; four, actions by other parties in reliance on the truth of the statements; and five, damage to the other party resulting from such reliance. So, I mean, this is going to be pretty simple to prove, in my opinion. The mail was sent, and the clerk who picked up the mail, they reasonably believe that it was a mail from R. Kelly. They found it. Now they look like a complete moron. They could possibly even lose their job. And it's not the person. It's not you. We're not only looking at the person who actually found it, but several people could actually are at risk for losing their job. Because this person sent this mail in, and people relied on it actually being from R. Kelly, and then they found it. So you can lose your job over this, right? Because they can argue that someone could argue that you were negligent and you should have followed certain procedures. And I'm not sure what those procedures could be to confirm that it was actually from R. Kelly. Now, I don't know if I said it in the other video, but we live in an information age, right? The age of information. And we have to, as a society, come up with different ways to ensure that stuff like this doesn't happen, because fraud is rampant, right? For all we know, some Russian spy could have dropped this in the mail simply to, cause this chaos and to, stroke the flames of the R. Kelly supporters, right? They could probably be trying to outrage the R. Kelly supporters. They could probably be trying to mock the U.S. justice system, right? So with all these attacks coming from overseas, we don't know if we don't know what the intentions of this is, right? And you're going to see why I'm saying this in a second, right? So let me just throw some conspiracy theories out there, right? And one of the conspiracy theories I'm going to throw out there, and again, this is a conspiracy theory, right? It's a conspiracy theory, so I'm not alleging that this actually happened. I'm just throwing a theory out there that this possibly could have been, or I'm just throwing a conspiracy theory out there that in some alternate universe or some parallel universe, this is what happened. So again, I'm just making this clear. I'm not alleging anything. I'm just throwing out a conspiracy theory. It's not true. There's no chance of it being true. I'm just throwing it out there. And that conspiracy theory is going to be that R. Kelly's defense team themselves sent the letter. And in a parallel universe, that makes sense. And the reason I say it makes sense, and you're going to have to, you're going to see once we get into the content of the actual motion and the letter, why it could possibly make sense, right? In a parallel universe. Again, I'm not alleging that they actually did it. I'm just playing devil's advocate, and I'm talking about something that happened in a parallel universe. It didn't happen. There's no chance of it actually happening. I'm just basically talking about a conspiracy theory, right? So The reason I say that this happened in the parallel universe is because, and you're going to see as we get into this, that a grand jury is bound to secrecy. And because of case law and because of the history of the grand jury, it's almost impossible to actually get the grand jury to divulge their secrets. So let's just go ahead and look at the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure so we can get into this.